everyone and welcome. In my last video I talked about my 10 favorite books of 2021 and today I have a little bit of a less exciting topic unfortunately, because today I'm going to talk about all my DNFs, my worst pickups and my most disappointing reads. And I'm going to lump them together in one video because I don't want to have too much negativity, but at the same time I do want to let you know that these books just didn't work for me. And I'm going to start by talking about all of the DNFs. Now, I've said this in numerous videos in the past, DNF doesn't mean that this is a bad book per se. It can mean that it's just not my cup of tea and that I'm never going to pick it up again, but it can also mean that it just wasn't the right timing and that I might give it another try and who knows, might enjoy it the second time around. But for now, these didn't work for me when I picked them up in 2021. And the first book is Magician by Raymond E. Feist. This is the first book in a trilogy, which is the first trilogy in a longer series called the Rift Force cycle, if I'm not mistaken. This is very traditional fantasy, so maybe I should have known that I wouldn't like this one because I'm not the biggest fan of traditional fantasy. But on top of that, it was also written very young, which is something that I don't really like. I think if I was maybe 10 to 15 years younger, I would have liked this a little bit more. But for now, it felt very wish fulfillment. There was a lot of just staying on the surface. It was very superficial, in my opinion. There was not a lot of character development and a lot of, like I said, wish fulfillment. You follow a kitchen boy named Puck. I only read 80 pages of this very thick book, 800-page book. And in those 80 pages already, Puck became a magician's apprentice. And all of a sudden, he has all of these hidden powers that his master doesn't even have. Everybody is in awe of him. The princess, all of a sudden, is in love with him. He has all of these amazing friends. There are elves, there are orcs or trolls, something like that, just in the first 80 pages. I didn't like it. Also, Puck acts like a child, which is normal because he is a child. We also have adults here who act as if they are children. And I am talking about the king and, like I said, the master wizard. These are people that should be a little bit more intelligent than they are in this book. So yeah, this is a DNF that I know that I'm not going to pick up again because it's just not my cup of tea. And the same thing is true for this other book, and that is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. This is a very different read than what I normally pick up. I tried to read it in October because it was part of a buddy read, but yeah, it's not working. This one, it's just pretentious, and I can understand that if you like this kind of book, you're not going to think that way. But for me and what I normally like, I thought that this book was too pretentious. It tried to be very witty, very smart, and while I was reading it, I actually felt dumb. And I don't like feeling dumb while reading a book. There were different timelines, there was a story within a story within a story, and I think that if it was just a little bit more streamlined, and if we kept to the main story, and not have all of these side stories that I couldn't care less about, to be honest, I think the story would have been better. But yeah, for now, for forever, to be honest, I'm just not going to like this book. Also, the main character, Johnny or John or whatever his name was, he was one of those cool boys or cool kids, or he was an adult, I think, but he felt as if he was a teenager, and I do not have the patience to deal with people like that. So yeah, definitely a DNF. The next one I am going to pick up again, because I think that this was more that I was expecting to absolutely love it. And then when I didn't, I decided to just put it down instead of not hate reading it, but reading it in disappointment the entire time. And that is Skullsworn by Brian Staveley. If you don't know, the Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne trilogy by this author is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I have a non-spoiler review for that. And this is a standalone in the same world where we follow a secondary character of that main trilogy that I quite enjoyed as a secondary character. This is somebody who is a priestess of the god of death. So she's actually a sort of assassin, but she thinks that by assassinating people, she is paying homage to the god of death. And while you are following her, this is actually a prologue, it takes place before the events in the Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne, she needs to pass a trial, and before that she can be an actual priestess. And for this trial she needs to kill a number of people. And one of the people that she needs to kill is somebody that she loves. But she's never been in love before, so we follow her on this journey where she tries to fall in love and then kill that person. This was a very interesting character as a secondary character, but I don't think that she is too well enough fleshed out to really carry a story. She was pretty one-dimensional. She kills, badass, that's it. And I need something more to actually like that person. I also think that the plot was just not that well thought of because it just felt very unrealistic. Why, if you are the perfect assassin, if you really believe in this goddess, if you want to work for her and pray towards her, why would you fail just because you've never been in love? I think that that would have been a good trait for an assassin. Also, how she tries to then fall in love is just... yeah, I don't think that this is the smartest or the best plot that he could have thought of, but if the character was then interesting enough and just a little bit more deeper, I would have remained invested. But that wasn't the case. So I'm still going to pick it up afterwards because the writing style is beautiful. It's better than in the Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne, in my opinion, but everything else wasn't that good. So I think it's going to be a fine book, maybe like middle of the road, which at that point I was too disappointed about to pick up again. But thinking about it now and going in with those expectations, I do think that I might end up enjoying it. Another one in the same vein, maybe a little bit, is The Counselor by H.A. Beaton. I've talked about this recently because this was a recent DNF. This was pitched to me as having a lot of political intrigue, which is something that I always like, and that it's a standalone. I do think that a sequel is now coming out either this year or next year, so it's no longer a standalone, but you can read it as such from what I've heard. But I didn't think that the political intrigue from the first 100 pages or so that I've read is that good. It's like our main character gets a note and it's just one sentence and it's something like, enjoy the flowers. And this character analyzes it to an extent that, yes, maybe this is the hidden message within a hidden message within a hidden message, or maybe he just wants you to enjoy the flowers. It's quite possible. So I just didn't like it. I thought it was going deeper than it should be, and that is realistic that it is. Also, this main character felt like a Mary Sue, where she had some issues. She came from a lower class of where she is at this point, but she could function quite well, and she was very smart. She's a genius, and all of that just isn't really interesting for me to follow. Now, again, I had very high expectations of this book, and I just couldn't picture anything while reading it. So maybe I need to pick it up in a couple of months, maybe with new expectations and knowing that it's difficult to get into and just push through. And who knows, maybe I like it more, and maybe that was a mistake and I just remain to dislike it. I still want to give it a chance. The same is true for the next book, and that is The Black-Tongued Thief by Christopher Buehlman. This is the first book in a series called The Black-Tongued Thief, if I'm not mistaken. This is a funny book. And that's basically everything that I felt while reading the first 150 pages. The main character is nothing really special. I didn't really feel like he had anything worthy to take notice of. He was just very one-dimensional. He is a thief, he is in debt, so now he takes on a job. Hopefully to get some money to pay off his debt. And that's basically it. You had a lot of side plot lines going on, even in the first 150 pages, that made me think, what's actually going on here? What is going to be the main story here? And while I picked it up, I just didn't really have the patience to sit through it when I didn't really care for the plot, I didn't really care for the main character, and the only thing that I do think it had going on was that it was very funny at times. So at that point, that wasn't really enough to keep me invested. I do think that maybe in a time where I am not in the middle of a reading slump, because that was the case here, I might like it more. And when the second book of the series comes out and I hear a lot of great things about it, I might pick this one up again. I also think that if you like the humor, like Joe Abercrombie, for example, I do think that you might like this one as well. I don't think that it's as well written. I don't think that the characters are as fleshed out, but the humor part, he did do great justice. And then I think my last DNF, luckily, we're almost there, and this is Hunter's Oath by Michelle West. So that's the first book in the Sacred Hunt duology. I wanted to read something by Michelle West, and she has written a lot of different series that take place in the same world, same universe kind of thing, and a lot of people told me that this is the first one that you need to read chronologically. Only afterwards I've heard that this is also the one that's worst written. So I was going in, this was a 5-star prediction. I made a 5-star predictions video, this was on it. It's already here. I read a total of 76 pages and I couldn't continue. And big part of it was that I had the wrong expectations. This book is about hunter lords. And these hunter lords have hunting dogs as animal companions. They have a special bond with us. So, animal companions, yay. These hunter lords also have a special friendship with somebody from the lower class. So, friendship, yay. These hunter lords can hunt in the woods to feed their people throughout the year. So you have a forest type setting, which is also something that I love. But in return, they need to be hunted one time a year by the hunter god. So again, religion, gods, something that I love. I read the start and we follow these two friends. So you have the hunter lord and you have his friend from the lower class. And you follow them when they are very young. So I was thinking, yes, coming of age story, I'm going to love this. Then all of a sudden we go to the city and we follow a woman who can time travel. this is not what was sold to me. So I was very disappointed by this. I thought that it was very convoluted from the start, and this just wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting a cozy story about friendship, about animal companions in the woods, and to cry a little bit because, of course, we are going to have this hunter god come and maybe kill one of these two friends. That was what I was expecting, to have a good emotional investment in this friendship and to maybe cry towards the end. I wasn't expecting time travel, which is something that I don't like in fantasy anyway, so that's why I DNF'd it. Maybe I come back to it again knowing what I'm going into and knowing that this is the worst of her books, what people say who have read everything by her, that I need to get through it to get to her main series, which is a lot better from what I've heard. But I don't know when that will happen, because at this point I have a lot of books on my shelves that I know I will love, or at least still have that 5-star prediction feeling. While with this one, I know with the time traveling and with the different storylines that I just didn't know was going to be in here, I'm probably not going to love it. At best, I'm going to think it's fine. So yeah, we will see. So those were all of my DNFs. Now we are going to go to my worst pickups as well as just disappointing reads. So for the worst reads, these are books that I just did not like, I cannot recommend. My disappointing reads are books that might be fine, but I just had a lot higher expectations. But all of these I did actually finish. And the first one that I want to talk about, because I am going to forget this, is Ruin by John Gwynne. So this is the third book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, and to be honest, the Faithful and the Fallen series as a whole can be on my disappointing list, I suppose. Because, yeah, I just didn't like it. I was reading this as a read-along, and while I was reading it and while I was talking about it, I said that I did like it. And I think that part of it was that I had to read it very fast for that read-along, because I kept putting it off until the day of the read-along, and then I read it in a day. And when you're that invested in the story and you're just really speed reading it, it might feel like you really like it. But on the other hand, I wouldn't have kept putting it off if I liked it as much as I thought I would. Malice had potential, because Malice was very good versus evil. It's very traditional fantasy-esque as well, because you don't have very nuanced characters, you do have just good versus evil. But Malice had enough that I thought that it would become better in the second and the third book. I do think that the second book was a step up from Malice, because it changed some of the things that I didn't like in Malice, and then it actually made it better. But then in the third one, it was battle after battle after battle, and none of these battles mattered, because you know the people that are on the good side are going to survive. Yes, you have some casualties of people that you don't really care about anyway, but you know that the good are going to survive, you know that the bad are going to lose. I don't need to read the fourth book, I don't need to read the conclusion of this series, because I know what's going to happen in the end. So what's the point then? Why do I need to read about battle scene after battle scene? I don't like reading about battle scenes, by the way. What I do like about battle scenes is having that suspension. If I do feel scared for my main characters, if I do think that something very bad might happen, yes, that's when I do like a battle scene from time to time. But if you have 10 and I can lose 9 and the story remains the same, something is wrong. Also, the writing style here is very weak. I can see that some people might like this type of story. I cannot understand that you can't see that the writing style is not that good. I have some favorite books. I have books on my top 10 list that I know the writing style is not good, but I can acknowledge that. Faithful and the Fallen has some of the worst dialogues ever. There are things that are being said to one another that just, they almost feel as if they should have been on a high school play where, you know, you're looking at the audience and like, remember, and you just talk to each other, but you're actually just having that conversation so that the audience can follow, and it's very clear that that's what's going on. That's how the Faithful and the Fallen felt for me, at least the dialogues. Also, you had some twists and turns, but everything was very obvious that it was going to happen from a mile away. So it wasn't well executed. Yeah, I am the worst person to predict things to happen in books. People often laugh at me because I cannot predict. In The Faithful and the Fallen, I think that I have predicted each and every twist, which isn't the best thing ever. Another one that I am going to talk about right now, because otherwise I forget, because I have unhauled these two series, and that is Wheel of Time. I tried to get into the 5th book, I couldn't, I DNF'd it 2 pages in. That's when I realized I don't want to read 10 more books in this series. I do have an entire video about why I DNF'd Wheel of Time. I'm going to just put it in the cards here and stop rambling about it, because I just severely dislike that series. Then the next book is a disappointing read. It's also a bad read. It's just a mix of the two. But I am going to continue with the series because people who have read the entire series agree that this is the worst book in that series and that afterwards it gets a lot better. And that is Trader's Moon by Lynn Llewellyn. This is the 3rd book in the Night Runners series. Now, I must say that even though I want to continue with the series, This is the reason why I stopped for a very long time. I have not continued with the series after this one for months at this point. So I do hope that I will someday pick up the fourth book because this one was bad. In this series, we follow Alec and Sergel. They are a spy duo. They are also lovers. I really love their relationship. In this third book, you have a lot of political intrigue, and it's almost like it's a parody on political intrigue because it's very bad. You also have names that are so confusing. Nobody can follow this book because all of the names that the characters have in this book are so confusing. They are so similar to one another. They are so long. They're like the parody of fantasy names that you just cannot follow. Why I like these books? Well, because of Alec and Sergel. When they are spying, when they are with each other, when you can see their relationship evolving. That's what I like. You didn't have any of that in this book. And then what you do have, like the political intrigue, was just very bad. So yeah. This was a big disappointment because I liked the first and the second book very much, and then this one I didn't. So a big disappointment, but on top of that, also one of the worst books that I have read this year. I have heard that the fourth one is amazing again, so let's just hope that I pick it up soon. Then another disappointing read, and a lot of people actually love this, and that is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I do think that I have a review for this one. If that's the case, I will link it in the cards up above. In this one, we follow 3 witches in New Salem. It's a little bit more modern fantasy than I would like, but nothing of that is an issue to me. I also really enjoyed that you have like small intersections where you have a fairy tale. So it feels very fairy tale-esque, but it also feels too light to my liking. It's a very light read. The writing style is beautiful, but you have these 3 characters. You have 3 sisters. They all have a very distinct character trait. It's very similar to Sister Song, for example, which I did love, or The Queens of Insular, which I also loved. But here the characters are just not that well developed. They feel very one-dimensional, and around halfway through I realized that I didn't care about these characters at all. Also, the villain is just your typical villain. There's not a reason why he's bad, he's just bad. That's it, basically. I think that the feminist issue here, I really like books where you have a big feminist theme. It was here as well, but it was too on the nose. It used like very small issues and then blew them up, which almost made me feel like feminism was a joke. There are so many very difficult issues here in this book, in this time period. New Salem, I think the beginning of the 20th century or the end of the 19th century. And they then take very petty issues to talk about. So that's why I just didn't like this book. I think that it had everything that in theory I would like, but in the end it fell flat for me. And the biggest issue here was definitely the characters and that I couldn't connect with the characters. But if you like fairy tale retellings, if you like plot-driven books more than anything, and a beautiful writing style, I do think that a lot of people would actually like that one. But for me, it just wasn't what I was looking for. And the same thing can be said about the next book, and that is Ring Child by P. Jelly Clark. Now, this is not a bad book. This is very short, it's a novella. I am very hard to please with novellas because they are so short that I cannot become invested to the characters, and because as a fantasy lover I do like my big world buildings, my intricate magic systems, and in a novella you're not going to have that because they don't have space. So I do think that the premise here is very interesting. It takes place in the beginning of the 20th century in the US. You have the Ku Klux Klan, and some members of this Ku Klux Klan are actually monsters, and you have some people of the normal population who can see these monsters for what they are, and we follow a group of monster hunters. This is a very interesting premise. I think that the writing style is very good. I think that this just didn't have enough room to really tell the story and do it justice. Now, I still like this one, but this was a 5-star prediction because everybody raved about this, like, this is going to be your new all-time favorite, and in the end it just didn't. It was a fine book and nothing really more. And this next one that I did read in completion was a bad book. I talked about this quite recently, so I will link that video up above to not talk about this too much, but that is In the Vanishers Palace by Aliette de Bodard. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's Asian inspired. The beast here is a shapeshifter who can change into a dragon. The romance here is, it's there, but I cannot feel that it's there. I think that it was very badly executed. I think that the magic system here and the premise in general is very well thought out, because you have magic system that is connected to genetic mutations and to an older race that used to be here. It reminded me a little bit of The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams, but everything else was, it was just so convoluted. If you now tell me to explain the story and what happened here, I honestly cannot explain it to you. I don't really understand what the story was. It felt like we were following a bunch of characters doing stuff. the end. And if the characters are interesting enough and if the relationship is interesting enough, I can forgive that, but that wasn't here, so I don't even know what this story was, to be honest. Then next up I have the first in a series. This was actually the first book I think that I read in 2021, and I DNF'd the entire series. And that is The Halfdrowned King by Linnea Hartzucker, which is the first book in the Golden Wolf saga. This is not a fantasy, this is an historical fiction, it's Viking inspired, and the main reason why I didn't like this was that the characters were so stupid. I don't really remember too much about this. We follow a sibling duo, a man and a woman, and the man gets betrayed on a raid, if I'm not mistaken, and he's left for dead. But he is not dead, surprise, surprise, and he tries to get back and to reclaim his land. I thought that that was going to be the entire first book. This gets resolved probably 100 pages in, and then we have political intrigue, which is just the worst. I have heard that this is very close to the actual history, so it's very historically accurate. You do have like a board game, for example, that actually existed. So I do applaud the author for that. That's very well done. The writing style was not well done. The characters were not well developed. And some of the choices that were made by the characters here were just, we need to do this because the plot needs to move on. This is not realistic. This is not smart. This is not logical at all, but we're still going to do it because this is the direction that the plots need to go to. And that's some of the things that I just cannot forgive as a character-driven reader. So this was a DNF, which is a shame because look at this cover. And I have the entire trilogy already and I am going to keep it because these covers are absolutely beautiful, but I will never continue with the series, unfortunately. Next up, a book that I severely disliked. I have talked about this multiple times. I'm probably going to just leave a rant in the cards up above because nobody has time for this. The Wolven Woodsman by Ava Reid. This was a 5-star prediction again because we follow a pagan girl who should have powers she doesn't have, and she gets betrayed by the people of her village because once a year the people of her village need to give a girl with powers to the kingdom, and they don't really know what happens to them, but you know, it's not going to be good. She gets betrayed by the people in her village, and you know, she's the next one that they sacrifice. So she has this whole journey through the woods with the woodsmen who are in service of the king towards the kingdom. Something happens in the beginning and now she's left with one of the woodsmen, the main woodsman, and things happen. This is an enemies to lovers. It's probably one of the worst enemies to lovers that I've read because it's I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I love you, but I will still treat you like garbage, which doesn't make sense. The main character is unlikable. I think that she tried to write somebody with trauma. She just wrote an unlikable character, which isn't realistic for a person with trauma, in my opinion. And the plot, I cannot tell you what the plot is about because I was listening to this, otherwise I would have DNF'd it probably, and I just kept thinking, these people are so annoying. I don't know what's happening here. What is this relationship about even? So I didn't even pay attention to the plot. I don't really know what happens. And then my last two books. So one is, this is probably a combination between didn't like the book that much and was a little bit disappointed. These are by far the best books that I'm going to talk about during this video. And they're also the last ones that I'm going to talk about. The first one is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I didn't like how Darrow, the main character, was portrayed here. I don't think that it was realistic. Normally you have a personality of this character and it needs to be somewhat stable. Even from the beginning, there were just some discrepancies that irked me the wrong way. I think that in general this felt like a Hunger Games retelling and I just didn't really find it that engaging, that unique to continue reading. So I actually wanted to DNF the series after this. I must say that thinking about it again, I don't really know if I was just very harsh at the time or if it really was that bad written as I thought. But anyway, that's why I didn't want to continue. Spoiler, if you haven't seen my top 10 books of 2021, the second book in the series, Golden Sun, was very high on that list. So I'm very glad that I did continue reading. And now I do want to reread Red Rising someday just to see if, knowing what I know that came after, if I still dislike the book as much as I did. Now, that series is definitely one of highs and lows because Iron Gold, the fourth book in the series, is on my disappointment list. So the first 3 books in the series follow Darrow. Darrow is the main character, Darrow is the only character that you follow. And even though the author does make some mistakes and he basically screws up some rules that you shouldn't screw up if you are writing from one perspective, he does so in the third book, to be honest. Here he goes from one POV in the first 3 books to multiple POVs. Now this is something that Anthony Ryan has done in his Raven's Shadow series, and he does so masterfully because the new characters that you get to know, you are invested in, and you immediately see the bond that they have with the original characters that you got to know in the first trilogy. Here you have new characters, and for a lot of them, you don't really know what the connection is with our main character Darrow until maybe halfway or even further along in the book. So I didn't care about all of these other POVs, I only cared about Darrow. That was what I wanted to know more about, until, like I said, you have these connections with Darrow. But that meant that maybe half or 3/4 of the book I wasn't invested and I was a little bit annoyed. So I do think that you can go from one POV to multiple POVs. I think that it's difficult, and I also think that it's definitely not the safest bet, but you can do it. I think that here, Pierce Brown just didn't do it justice. So I am quite looking forward to the next book, which has a gold cover, but I don't really know what it's called anymore. But I have heard that that's like his best work in the entire series. So it's definitely a series with highs and lows, but that fourth book just didn't work for me. So these are all of my disappointing reads, worst books of 2021, as well as my DNFs. Unfortunately, not all of the books that we pick up can be 5 stars, I suppose. But I still think that, not take these into account, all of the other books that I picked up in 2021 were very good to amazing. So I still had an amazing year. Please let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these books and if you did like them, or if you had the same experience as me, and as well what your most disappointing book or DNF of the year was. As always, I hope that you enjoyed the video, and see you next time. Bye!